The amount you like Evangelion is inversely proportionate to the amount you like yourself at the time of watching it. Well put, Defcat. Well put. Cool guy, go check him out. Understanding Misato is like when you come to realize your mother's jokes about getting old and finding someone start to become a little more valid and a lot less funny. You realize you've watched Eva for so long that you've been drawn or relate to someone closer in age to yourself rather than the rest. Misato and her feelings start to become more applicable to circumstances you thought you didn't have. We're not talking about best girl, best boy, best inanimate object. We're talking about something else entirely. Best lady. Misato Katsuragi. From the preliminary moments we're introduced to Misato, her sexual objectification is found virtually everywhere. From the photos she used to introduce herself to Shinji to other various sexual suggestive symbolism, some obvious, some not so much. You can draw countless parallels from Evangelion to Freudian theories, one of which is the idea of Freudian slips. It's believed that inner self-desires can't be entirely suppressed, and means of venting out these feelings often come out as snarled comments or jokes. To at the very least get out the sensation of letting out these repressed feelings for a brief moment, veiled in sarcasm, where on a deeper level this is how someone may truly feel. The point is, Misato makes odd suggestions throughout the show signifying or putting light on her actions or thoughts about suppressed feelings.
And don't worry, I'm not gonna be making any passes at him. What did you say? You heard me!
Surely this was a deliberate joke she'd never seriously taken to earnest consideration, right? More on that later. But why does she behave this way? Not only towards Shinji, but towards everyone amongst the entire NGE cast. Misato is by far the most dynamic in that, she holds the most varied characteristics. While other Eva characters are perceived in only one way, Misato shows many sides of herself right from the very start. It's kind of interesting to consider because Asuka is seen as this fierce and feisty girl with the color connotation of red, while Rei is a cool, calm, and collected blue. But Misato's primary color composition is related to the color purple, a perfect combination of red and blue, suggesting that she shares both attributes, one who can be both composed and level-headed during a role as a commander while at the same time knows how to flaunt her fierceness. I don't fucking know. Early in episode 3, The Phone That Never Rings, Misato confronts Ritsuko about Shinji behaving distant towards others. She makes the observation that he may not have any friends, nor does he attempt to seek out any. Ritsuko at this moment explains the hedgehog's dilemma to Misato, a metaphor about the hardships of individual closeness, in that humans, like hedgehogs, in the effect of coming closer, end up hurting one another, and creating distance amongst each other is necessary to prevent further pain. What Misato responds with says more about her character than that of Shinji's. She expresses her opinion by saying, well, he'll eventually learn that growing up means getting closer to people and distancing them, finding the distance where you can avoid hurting each other too much. Shinji may be utterly inept at interpersonal relationships, but Misato shows some level of arrogance as well. Her saying avoiding the hurt is proof of that. She tolerates the pain up until a threshold, to which if the pain becomes overbearing she runs away. What Misato tells us suggests that she's closer to the depiction of the hedgehog's dilemma rather than Shinji. She was the one getting just close enough, but not quite enough to completely endure the pain. To prove this, Anno once gave the character designer of Misato a description of how she would inevitably turn out to be. He says, a woman, 29, who lives life so lightly as to barely allow the possibility of human touch. She protects herself by keeping relationships on the surface and by running away. The reason for this stems from her past. Her father was neglective towards both Misato and her mother, favoring work over anything. There wasn't much Misato could really do rather than be a good girl so that father would have an incentive on coming home. Not like it was very helpful in the end. Misato's father probably did sincerely love his family, but just not in an open type way. The day he took Misato to Antarctica for an expedition, a contact experiment led to the second impact, and within that very moment was the only time Misato's father ever showed outward care for her, when he sacrificed himself to save Misato, as well as giving her the cross he wore around his neck, which is pretty interesting because it's the same kind of hopeless affection Misato somewhat parallels near the end of Evangelion, where, when she knows she'll die, gives Shinji hope along with the cross, and sees him off before she dies. After all this took place, Misato became a mute for a while before meeting her nerve comrades and opening back up to Ritsuko and Kaji. She found solace in Kaji. More specifically, she found solace in using him for love to feel better about herself, and then ultimately running away. These are all things that she openly admits in the Drunken Date episode, along with the ending of the series, where we get a deeper look into the psyche of each character. As a result, she never quite had a true father figure, and the only way she learned how to cope with her pain was with intimacy. She became a provocative woman. In times of hardship, Misato reverts back to her provocative ways and of finding solutions with Kaji, with Shinji, like in episode 23 where Misato attempts to comfort Shinji. What?
Shinji-kun, 今の私にできるのはこのくらいしかないわ。やめてよ、ミサトさん。ごめんなさい。女が怖いのかしら。いえ、人との触れ合いが怖いのね。
Her father dying was her reason for joining Nerve in the first place. She lied to herself and said that she swore vengeance on the angels for taking her father's life. But the feelings she really felt were a combination of gratitude and hate for her father. She never quite projected her true self. There was always a facade, much like Shinji and Asuka, and undoubtedly her circumstances and how they relate to Shinji and Asuka is what led her to take them in the first place. And if we're to compare her empathy to anyone in the Nerve headquarters, she's by far a leader or a commander who cares the most about the pilots. She tries her best to guide her subordinates in the right direction, even if her methods are unorthodox. One of such situations is in the end of Evangelion, where she kisses Shinji off before having the last battle. I'm sure for most watching, it could be off-putting, but Misato had always been acting this way basically throughout the entire show. The meaning behind the kiss and the sentence or the words she spoke prior were merely an ego-boosting push given to Shinji. Well, she says the rest they'll do when they get back. She knows at that moment, and probably Shinji as well, that there is no return for her. So her statement was simply a way to give Shinji confidence in the impending battle he was about to endure. Misato found confidence or comfort primarily in such promiscuous actions, so this was a means of helping Shinji in the only way she knew how. In the end, with the help of Misato and everyone else, Shinji does find a reason to keep living and rejects Human Instrumentality Project. All the bonds he made along the way had a meaningful enough effect on Shinji and his final actions. Misato played a large role in Shinji's discovering of his true feelings. During the second last episode of the show, Misato has a conversation with Ritsuko where Ritsuko goes on to explain the Human Instrumentality Project in a bit more detail. Ritsuko explains by saying all men have a fundamental incompleteness, an emptiness that lies at the very core of everyone's soul. Man has always been aware of the darkness that lies at the core of his mind, and filling this metaphorical void is what the Human Instrumentality Project seeks to do. Misato rejects the idea and asks Ritsuko who made you humanity's overseer. She tells her that her benevolence has proved to be as false as their friendship, to which Ritsuko says, and yet it's exactly how you wished it to be. This is the beginning of Case 1, Misato's inner monologue on discovering her true self. And in this moment, she comes to realize her true feelings, her actual feelings.
あなたはカジ君の寝顔に安らぎを求めていたのよ。カジ君のぬくもりに安らぎを求めていたのよ。カジ君の腕の中に父親を求めていたのよ。違うわよ。こんなの本当の自分じゃない。そう思い込んでるだけなの。
そうしないと僕らは生きていけないのか。一緒にいないと怖いんだ。
不安なのよ。誰かが隣で寝ていないと。一人で寝るのが怖い？やっぱり一人で寝るのが寂しいんですか？
心の喪失に耐えられないんだよ。
いえ、簡単な快楽に溺れたいだけ。刹那的な逃避で心を癒したいだけ。そのために男を利用しているだけなのよ。
and expresses her newfound knowledge about herself to Shinji in the movie before the kiss takes place, when she tells him, "I'm not perfect either. I've made tons of stupid mistakes that I've later regretted, and I keep doing it. It's a cycle of hollow joys and vicious self-hatred. But even so, every time I learn something about myself." This is, in other words, how Misato learned to deal with this so-called void Ritsuko explained that resides deep within everyone. There is no way to fill the void, per se, and combining everyone and instrumentality is simply another way of escaping the pain. The message of Evangelion had always been to move onward despite the hardships of life. Perhaps there isn't a solution to this emptiness, but persistence itself. This is what Misato tells Shinji. What she learned about herself and everyone else is to not give up until the very end. She encourages Shinji to find out why he came to Nerve, to find out why he exists, and to fight the last fight, just like how Misato and everyone else in the series have been doing, mentally and physically. Evangelion had always been such an emotionally uplifting series if you know where to look. Misato's role in the series was amongst the most substantial for Shinji and the viewer as well to find reason and enticement to keep fighting the good fight.